When I first moved into Sycamore Glen, I told myself this would be the last stop. After 35 years as a federal engineer designing levees, dam reinforcements, and flood zone plans, I was finally ready to grow something softer, a garden, maybe an orchard. My wife had died 2 years earlier, my daughter lived across the country with her own family, and though I wasn't exactly lonely, I wanted a place where the quiet didn't feel so heavy. I bought a modest house on the edge of the development. It wasn't the prettiest on the block. Most homes in Sycamore Glen looked like they'd been copied out of a catalog, but mine came with something none of the others had, a strip of land dipping into what locals called a dry creek. They saw an empty trench. I saw a living flood channel, dry for 9 months but alive and dangerous when the storms rolled in. It was rocky and overgrown, with a few stubborn sycamores twisting out of the earth like old survivors. HOA rules forbade permanent structures down there, which suited me just fine. That untouched piece of land was the thing I valued most. My neighbors didn't understand. They called it wasted space. But I'd stand there, looking at stones carved by centuries of water, and remember the lesson that had kept me alive on some of my worst deployments. Nature never forgets its path. For the first few months, I stayed quiet, showing up at an occasional HOA meeting just to see how things worked. It didn't take long to spot the power structure. The board was run by Karen Dolman, 10 years younger than me, but full of the self-importance of someone who believed a college internship in real estate made her a zoning expert. She smiled like a politician, barked orders like a warden, and people either feared or fawned over her. I didn't either. From the start, I recognized her community improvement rhetoric for what it really was, ambition, and made a mental note to keep watch. Our first encounters were civil. She handed me the HOA binder with a cheery menace and made a passive-aggressive comment about the overgrown ravine behind my house. I explained it was a dry creek, part of a natural floodplain. Her smile stiffened. "We've been thinking of landscaping that ditch into something more attractive," she said. I nodded. No point fighting the first inning. Soon the flyers started, calls for residents to reimagine underused community areas. One proposed site was the dry creek. On paper, it wasn't part of any property. Developers had likely left it unclaimed because they knew it was a flood zone. Karen didn't know better. The first red flag came when I found two surveyors in the creek bed one morning, reflective vests and drone case in hand. Minutes later, Karen rolled up in her pearl white SUV, gym clothes, expensive sunglasses. "Oh, hi," she chirped. "Just doing some assessments. We're thinking of adding a decorative pond or pool to beautify the area." "You're surveying a floodplain," I said flatly. "It's dry," she replied. "It won't stay that way. This is a FEMA-designated runoff channel." She waved me off, smiling. "We've consulted experts." I could have told her I'd personally mapped the county's hydrology 20 years earlier, but I knew the type facts only made her dig in. Within weeks, stakes appeared, concrete was poured, and the planned pool area extended right into the creek bed behind my fence. I sent my first formal protest, citing zoning laws, FEMA overlays, and environmental clauses. The reply, a $75 landscaping fine taped to my door. Petty. Retaliatory. Proof of how far Karen was willing to go. That night I stood at the edge of the creek with a flashlight, staring at the concrete slab stretching across nature's corridor. Under the moonlight, the ripples in the cement looked almost alive, and I felt an old, familiar shiver, not fear, but the knowledge that nature keeps receipts, and one day someone would pay. At the next HOA meeting, Karen unveiled her Sycamore Glen Recreational Revitalization Initiative, blueprints projected like a civic announcement. Phase 1, the pool. She bragged about community involvement and increased property values. No one had voted. No one had even known until the trucks arrived. I raised my hand. Did the HOA obtain permits for building in a designated runoff channel? Karen's smile thinned. "We've consulted private contractors who assure us there's no engineering concern." "That's not what I asked," I said evenly. "Did you receive approval from the city or environmental review board?" The room went silent. Karen gave a little laugh. "Mr. Fenwick, this isn't a courtroom." No, I thought. It's worse. A neighborhood meeting where people clap for the illusion of leadership. She brushed off my question with vague talk of ongoing dialogue with authorities. I knew she was lying. You don't dialogue with the city when you build over a floodplain. You submit plans and wait months for review. But the crowd wanted their fantasy pond, their curated suburbia. So the crews moved in full force. Earth movers tore into the creek bed, bulldozed the saplings, leveled the slope, poured concrete footers into soil that had always been meant to breathe. I filmed everything from behind my fence. The next morning, another notice appeared, $150 fine for unauthorized surveillance of construction personnel. I laughed aloud. Karen had gone from queen to tyrant, inventing rules as she went. I knew I couldn't beat her at HOA meetings, her courtroom, her rules, but I had other tools. That night I compiled everything: timestamps, footage, correspondence, FEMA maps, zoning laws. I sent it to the city's Public Works Department, CCing environmental compliance and stormwater management. I also mailed a duplicate to an old colleague at the county hydrology office. Weeks passed, work continued, and they even built a retaining wall to redirect the creek so the pool could stretch farther. Artificial turf, decorative rocks, a cement waterfall, a spa built on a sleeping dragon. I tried warning them, spoke to the foreman, sent Karen another letter. Her reply arrived by a grinning teenager who taped it to my door. Mr. Fenwick, we appreciate your concern, but the board has reviewed your objections and found them unsubstantiated. Continued interference will result in further disciplinary action as per Section 7B of the Community Agreement. Respectfully, Karen Dolman, President, Sycamore Glen HOA. Section 7B, the board's catch-all excuse. They wielded it against everything from Christmas lights to mailbox flags. And now they were treating a floodplain violation like a parking ticket. What stung worse was the city's silence. No inspectors, no red tags, no response at all. Karen knew how to stall the system just long enough to finish her projects. And then, just when it seemed they might actually get away with it, nature intervened. It was a warm Tuesday in early August when dark clouds began massing over the mountains, disciplined as soldiers taking their places. I watched them from my kitchen window, coffee in hand, instinctively reading their weight, their color, their drift. By nightfall, the forecast shifted, flash flood warnings for the county. Saturated hills, soil too dry to absorb a quick downpour. A perfect recipe. At midnight, thunder cracked. At 2:13 a.m., my phone vibrated, code red. Flood conditions imminent. Seek higher ground. I pulled on boots, grabbed a jacket and flashlight, and stepped outside. The creek was alive again, water tearing through the gully like it remembered every bend. But the new concrete barriers choked it, diverting the flow. Within minutes, water piled against the pool walls like pressure behind a dam. Then came the sound I knew too well, a groan, a crack, collapse. The retaining wall buckled, the decorative waterfall split, and the torrent roared through, shredding everything in its path. Pool chairs, lights, fake boulders, all ripped away and carried downstream. I stood in the rain, not afraid, but silent, grimly vindicated. Karen had built her kingdom on sand, and nature had just handed down its verdict. By sunrise, the storm had passed. Light slanted through my windows as though nothing had happened. But outside, the illusion broke immediately. Where once stood Karen's carefully sculpted oasis, now lay a muddy wasteland. Broken tiles scattered like pottery shards. Rebar jutted from the muck like bones. The pool itself had collapsed into a jagged crater filled with swirling runoff. The land had spit her arrogance back at her. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, stunned. The retired dentist, the quiet hangs, young Erica Myers with her jogging earbuds, now staring wide-eyed at the wreckage. Karen stood among them in slippers and pajamas, disbelief painted on her face. "I don't understand," she cried. "This is insane. It was just a dry creek." That phrase hit me like a punch. I stepped forward, voice steady but loud enough for all. "It's only dry until it isn't." Karen spun, glaring. "Oh, and you think this is my fault?" "I warned you," I said simply. "More than once." Her face flushed. "You encouraged this. Maybe you even tampered with something." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I held her eyes. "You're accusing me of orchestrating a natural disaster?" Her excuses grew thinner. She babbled about water being redirected, about my backyard slope. But it was laughable. My property sat lower. If anyone suffered from redirected water, it was me. My fence was torn, my soil eroded. But none of that mattered. I hadn't tried to out-engineer a watershed with patio bricks. Then Erica spoke, quiet but firm. "I remember Mr. Fenwick talking about the floodplain at the last meeting. You called him paranoid." Karen froze. Mr. Keller, the old dentist, chimed in next. "He gave us maps. He warned us. You threw them away. Karen's shoulders sagged. For the first time, she seemed to grasp the stage was gone. All that remained was wreckage, and her responsibility. I left them there. Back in my study, I fired up the old desktop and began attaching files. Footage, timestamps, flood maps, zoning violations, every notice and fine. Then I drafted my report. To whom it may concern. The flooding event on August 12th at Sycamore Glen was a direct result of unauthorized construction on a designated floodplain. Attached are documents showing repeated warnings, legal citations, and photographic proof of the damage. I urge a full investigation. Respectfully, Douglas Fenwick. I sent it everywhere. City engineering, code enforcement, stormwater management, FEMA's regional liaison. I even printed certified hard copies. By afternoon, word spread. A city inspector arrived, boots caked with mud, clipboard thick with notes. Karen trailed him like a shadow, gesturing wildly, blaming everything from the sky to fate itself. The inspector didn't answer. He just kept writing. That evening, as rainwater still dripped from the eaves, my phone rang. It was Mark, the hydrologist I'd worked with all those years ago. Doug, Mark's voice was gravelly but steady, familiar even through the phone. I saw the video. Jesus. I nodded, though he couldn't see it. It was preventable, he sighed. We flagged that creek bed in '98 as high-risk overflow. It never should have been touched. Yeah, well, I muttered, they touched it. I've already escalated it to the environmental board, he said. And Doug, don't worry. This won't get buried. For the first time in weeks, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. It was starting. Sometimes the silence after destruction is the loudest part. But now people were listening. It took months before I understood the full scope of Karen's ambition. Looking back, the signs were always there. The way she controlled meetings, handed out fines like party favors, branded the neighborhood like it was her personal project. But the pool, that was different. That was Karen stepping out of petty tyranny and into empire building. She called it the Glen Oasis Project. I remember the glossy brochures, laminated renderings slipped into every mailbox, families lounging at zero-entry pools, kids splashing under LED-lit fountains, palm trees and folk cabanas straight out of a Vegas resort. All of it perched directly over a flood channel. No outlet, no retention, no drainage mitigation, just concrete sealing the arteries shut. It wasn't ignorance. It was defiance. At the next HOA meeting, I came armed. FEMA flood maps, case studies, percolation rates, even a lawsuit where another HOA had been fined 7 figures for almost the same mistake. Karen countered with sugar. Doug, we appreciate your passion, she said sweetly from the microphone. But times have changed. Climate models show less rainfall here, not more. And besides, we've built drainage solutions into the design. That was the lie that cut deepest. Their so-called solution? 2 PVC pipes punched through the wall like straws in a milk carton. Afterward, I cornered 2 contractors, kids, fresh out of school, eager to please. You boys know this area floods, right? They shrugged. We just follow the specs. HOA approves everything. Hydrological tests, flow models. I think there was a drone survey, one said. Flood contingency plan. Silence. They packed up and left. I stood in the buzzing fluorescent rec room, staring at her renderings pinned to the corkboard like blueprints for a mirage. Soon the bulldozers came. Karen paraded around in heels, barking orders like a wedding planner. Neighbors brought lawn chairs, clapped, posted photos online with hashtags like #GlenOasisComingsoon. I didn't clap. I just watched from my fence, arms folded, as the creek was gutted. One evening, Karen spotted me. She marched up with that brittle smile. Beautiful, isn't it? It's reckless, I said. The smile snapped off her face. I'm sorry you feel that way. But you're in the minority. The community has spoken. I pointed at the trench. The community didn't carve that. Nature did. And it's going to take it back. She leaned in, eyes cold. You think you can scare me with your doomsday speeches? We don't build around creeks anymore, Doug. We build over them. We beautify. You mean bury them. You had your time. Your house is a relic. Your backyard is a mess. You're holding this place back. I'm building the future. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Deep down, she already knew what I knew. No fountain, no concrete, no curated illusion can erase the memory of water. And water never forgets. When I filed a complaint with the city, I expected little. Bureaucracy moves slower than the damage it's meant to prevent. Still, I sent everything. Timestamp photos, annotated maps, FEMA designations, glossy HOA brochures, packets to zoning, environmental quality, stormwater management. Karen must have sensed it. Suddenly, every move I made was a violation. Mailbox height, flower beds too wild, bird feeder attracting vermin. Even the way my recycling bin faced the street. She fined me for all of it. I paid none. Instead, I mailed a single check for $1 with a note for services unrendered. That didn't sit well. Next week, a compliance officer in a uniform Karen had made up, barely 20 years old, probably paid in pizza, handed me another thick envelope. Ma'am says you have 14 days before legal action. I asked him, do you know what happens to neighborhoods that ignore watershed protocols? He blinked. I just hand out the letters, sir. I nodded, closed the door, and tossed the envelope into the fire. What burned hotter than paper was the fact that nobody, not the board, not the neighbors, not even the city inspector, was listening. At the following HOA meeting, I brought models. A scale representation of the creek, built in my garage. I poured water through it, showing how the channel ran harmlessly when unblocked, and then blocked it with a foam piece for Karen's pool. The water rose, backed up, spilled over into toy houses. Residents shifted uncomfortably. Karen snapped before I'd even finished. This is fear-mongering. Dramatic, yes, but not representative of the actual project. I turned to her. Then please, Karen, show us your model. She hesitated, then smirked. We have engineers handling that. Licensed professionals, not hobbyists. The room chuckled, mean and shallow. I didn't argue. I packed up my model, but not before handing a copy of the demo video to a local reporter I'd quietly invited. She nodded once and slipped out. Days later, an article appeared, Floodplain Fiasco. HOA faces scrutiny over pool project. Not a bombshell, but a spark. And sparks catch. Karen, though, stayed untouchable, at least in her own mind. She doubled down. Lights installed. Bluetooth fountains added. Shallow-rooted shrubs planted where deep-rooted trees had once anchored the soil. The HOA newsletter bragged, Glen Oasis Project, 93% complete. One line in that newsletter stuck out to me like a blade. We've worked hard to transform and used land into something beautiful and lasting. Lasting. That word haunted me. That evening, I stood by my fence watching the so-called oasis shimmer under artificial lights. Electric blue water glowed against the night, speakers hidden in bushes spilled ambient music, and for a moment you could almost believe the lie. But I knew better. It wasn't an oasis. It was a powder keg, and nature was holding the lighter. The first raindrops came like whispers, tapping at my window panes around 5 p.m. Gray clouds rolled in from the west, swollen and urgent. By nightfall, drizzle became a torrent. My rain gauge climbed an inch in less than an hour. The creek behind my property, once dismissed as useless land, stirred awake, rivulets tracing old scars through the soil. By 10:30, it wasn't a trickle but a pulse, and then a roar. I saw the pool wall bow, concrete trembling under pressure it was never meant to withstand. Then it gave. The retaining wall exploded in a violent burst, chlorinated blue colliding with wild brown floodwater. Furniture, lights, cabanas, everything Karen had staged for her empire, was ripped away in seconds. Her Glen Oasis collapsed into chaos. She stumbled out into the storm, mascara running, phone raised in disbelief. You did this, she screamed at me. But I hadn't brought the rain. I had only warned of it. Nature did the rest. By dawn, the lasting monument was rubble, broken rebar, shattered tiles, twisted fencing. And through it all, the creek flowed again, steady, relentless, as if reclaiming a memory no one should have dared to erase. Neighbors gathered in silence, not looking at me as the crazy old man anymore, but as the man who had been right. Karen raged, accused, and flailed, but the spell had broken. Her throne had drowned in the very waters she denied. And when the city finally came, clipboards in hand and surveyors marking the land, I felt something I hadn't in months, relief. Because nature doesn't forget. And this time, neither would the people. Drones hovered above, recording the scars left by the flood, the altered path of the water, the shifted soil, and how close the remains of Karen's pool had come to destabilizing neighboring yards. The neighborhood, unusually subdued, seemed to hold its breath. Karen herself had vanished after walking out of the hearing. Her SUV disappeared, curtains drawn, house dark. Some claimed she was staying with her sister. Others said she was talking to lawyers. Either way, even her most loyal allies had gone silent. Days later, I opened an envelope sealed with the city's emblem. The report was damning. The Glen Oasis project, pushed by the Sycamore Glen HOA, had broken multiple codes. Unapproved land alteration in a drainage corridor, skipped environmental review, falsified engineering submissions. And worse, it opened the door for civil damages. Any homeowner harmed by the redirected waters could demand compensation from HOA funds, and possibly from negligent board members themselves. That triggered the unraveling. Residents who once applauded the project started demanding audits. Where had the money gone? Who had signed off on contracts? Soon, board resignations trickled in. Some tried to wash their hands of Karen, but subpoenaed emails told a different story. Safety concerns had been dismissed, warnings ignored. One of Karen's emails read, "Fenwick is just a bitter old man with too much time and a hero complex. Let him cry about his ditch. The pool will speak for itself." It had spoken loudly. Reporters arrived. Local news ran stories about the HOA that flooded itself. Against my instinct, I went on camera. I didn't dramatize. I laid out facts and cautioned other communities to respect the land they build on. One clipped me by the creek, telling a reporter, "Water doesn't hold grudges, but it remembers." Spread far beyond our town. Messages poured in from across the country. Homeowners punished for planting native species. Retirees sued for keeping erosion-preventing trees. Ponds drained for tennis courts. I replied to each one, sharing what I could: templates, resources, contacts. A quiet network began forming, not just resisting abuse, but arming themselves with knowledge. By winter, Glen Oasis was gone. Not repaired, erased. Crews jackhammered the concrete, hauled it away, reshaped the land under city supervision. The creek was widened and stabilized with native grass. Modest fencing and flood markers replaced ornamental gates. And one morning, a wooden sign appeared, "Sycamore Creek Restoration Site. Please respect this natural watershed." It protected us long before we tried to tame it. No one claimed credit, but we all knew. The HOA collapsed and reformed. Elections brought new leadership. Erica Myers, the jogger once hesitant to speak up, was elected president on promises of transparency and ecology. She asked me to advise, and I agreed with one condition: no more pools over creeks. She grinned. "You'll drown us in paperwork before the water gets a chance." That Christmas, every household received a bound report from the city. Its polished navy cover belied its contents, 38 pages cataloging negligence, zoning violations, and falsehoods. It named Karen 13 times, none kindly. Damages exceeded $450,000. Lawsuits followed, from homeowners, from environmental groups, from the state licensing board, once it was discovered an approving engineer's credentials had expired. Insurance companies scrambled to limit liability. The HOA issued a formal apology. Too late. Karen sold her house in January. No listings, no farewells, just a moving truck in the night. I watched her drive away with my morning coffee. No anger, no gloating, just the quiet weight of consequence. Her absence changed everything. Residents once afraid to speak now ran for office. Erica's reforms stuck. Budgets were posted online, votes required for expenses, new committees formed for sustainability and flood preparedness. People who had never raised their voices found themselves leading. In April, neighbors gathered by the restored creek for a new sign unveiling. Gone was the iron plaque bragging of prestige. In its place stood a hand-carved wooden marker, "Sycamore Creek. Let the land breathe in memory of the storm that taught us to listen." We stood together in silence. No speeches, no ribbons. Just water flowing steadily, as it always had. Spring softened the scars. Wildflowers grew along the banks, parents brought their children to play, and a simple bench under the sycamore offered a place to sit and remember. One day a young girl sketched the creek in her notebook and asked me if the water was happy now. I told her it wasn't anger she'd seen before, just neglect. Looking at the minnows darting in the current, I admitted it was at peace. And so was I. For years, I'd cleaned up after disasters, always in the shadows, fixing what was broken but never stopping the damage before it spread. This time, I'd stood firm, been mocked, threatened, painted as the problem. And yet the flood had proven otherwise. The water had vindicated me and reminded everyone of a truth older than any ordinance. You can argue with neighbors, but not with rain. It comes when it comes, leaves when it leaves, and if you're wise, you make room for it. I still answer emails from homeowners across the country. Some stories sting, others amuse, but all carry the same lesson. Justice doesn't always arrive with a gavel. Sometimes it's a storm, sometimes a letter in the mail, sometimes just the quiet murmur of a creek, free and untamed, running exactly where it was meant to be.